Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the show, Science, Facts, and Fallacies podcast, episode 287. I'm Cameron English. That's Dr. Liza Dunn. We're excited to be here. Liza, what's going on?
Not much. How are you?
I am loving it. It's the end of the week, spending some time with
Woohoo!
my daughter, which is always interesting. Let's call it that. It's fun. I love her to death, but sometimes, let me just get through this Zoom call without you
That's
crying.
exactly
Please, please.
right. This too shall pass.
Yes. Yes, that's what I'm told, right? It goes very quickly, and then when it's gone, you get all sad, and you go, why can't you be small again? So I'm trying to enjoy the moments while I
Yes.
have them. Okay, well, we got some stories to get through, as we typically do. I want to say, before we jump into those, we had our most recent space. It was awesome. We had a lot of smart people talking about how we deal with fraud in science, because there's some incredible cases that are in motion right now of people, really high level prominent people at major schools, apparently fabricating key data in their studies, which is a big deal. One, because being dishonest is antithetical to good science, obviously, but then you have clinical trials for drugs that have been approved by the FDA on the basis of some of this research,
Yep.
which means that potentially people's lives are in jeopardy, because the drugs might not work because they are designed around a false premise.
Faulty science.
Yes.
Yes. False premises.
Yes. So we talked about some interesting tools that journals can implement to detect fraud. We talked about some controversial solutions, like charging people with crimes when they waste public money and people get sick or get hurt because of it. So things are a changing. Just the fact that we're having a conversation like that. So it was great.
They are.
Come to the next one, Friday, 11 a.m. Central Time, and we'd love to hear your opinion. But that's it for now. Let's get into our stories. 3 as usual. First up, how Rachel Carson's Silent Spring inspired today's misplaced chemophobia and endangers public health. Next up, large-scale intensive land-sparing farming is the sustainable future, not the problem. And finally, placebo controversy. When should they ethically be used in studies and in medicine? Which is intriguing.
They're all interesting.
First story here. This is by Kate McBride, writing for Slate originally. And Liza, you can give some background here if you'd like. But Silent Spring was this groundbreaking book that was put out in 1962 or 1962 by Rachel Carson, who is heralded by almost everyone in science and in the environmental movement. This is one of the few things everyone seems to agree on, is that she was a titan, in the movement to protect the environment. And she seemed to lack a lot of the radical qualities that a lot of environmental groups have these days, where they want to throw everything out with the bathwater, not just the baby, everything in the house. Like everything needs to go out in the name of us achieving our goals.
Right.
And she didn't seem to do that. Obviously, I didn't know her, but she didn't seem to do that, right? So she took aim at DDT, which we can talk about in a second. But in the place of DDT, she recommended at least one other chemistry that she said was lower risk and could achieve the same goals. So for taking on that sort of a risk assessment approach in her writing, she's remembered positively. But nevertheless, what McBride's getting at in the story is that there was still some, the seeds of chemophobia within her work. And we've talked, I don't know if we've talked about it on the show, we talked about it on the space, how even Dr. Paul Offit, who is another titan within the science communication world, who's been very vocal and serious about defending vaccines, he even criticized her in an article for the Daily Beast in 2017. And he pointed out that millions of people died because of her campaign against DDT, because a lot of what she said about this particular pesticide was just wrong. And so you had countries ban it, you had them restrict it, and because of that, a lot of mosquito-borne illnesses were transferred. And
Yep.
a lot of people got sick and died. And I don't know if I asked this publicly, but to me, it seems really strange that we sort of pass over that. People will acknowledge that it happened, but a few bad apples, everyone misses every once in a while. I'm like, yeah, but that's not like forgetting, something off your grocery list. That's a really big that's a really big deal.
It's a big deal if it was your kid that died of an insect-borne illness.
Right. So all that to say, I'm glad to see this. I'm glad to see this article because I think what we owe to everyone, especially when we're trying to build trust in science, which is sorely lacking right now, is to be honest and say there was some good, there was some bad.
That's right.
Here's what we can do better. But there seems to be, and we sort of got into this in the space too. There's this sort of, it's an unspoken assumption, I think, that there's just certain people you just don't criticize, or if you do, you do it around the edges, right? Yeah, there was a few things they got wrong, but overall, we love them. They're the bee's knees, and I think that has to change, and I think this case is a great example of that.
Yeah, I think so too. Yeah. So, just a little background on DDT for people who don't know a lot about it. DDT revolutionized public health. Where it came from was at the dawn of World War II, there's a huge shortage of pyrethrum, which was a naturally occurring chemistry that paralyzes insects. It works on insects' nerves. It comes from chrysanthemums. And so there was a mad dash to find a low toxicity insecticide that you could protect troops with, because the leading cause of death in the military turns out actually not to be war wounds, but insect-borne illness. And so whole swaths of armies would get wiped out because of epidemic typhus, which is carried by lice, or malaria, a variety of different illnesses. And a Swiss chemist by the name of Paul Mueller, actually DDT was, I think, discovered in the late 1880s and put on a shelf. And Paul Mueller was a Swiss chemist who took it off the shelf and realized that it had incredible ability to kill insects and very low toxicity for people. And this was a boon. He won a Nobel Prize for DDT in 1948. And by 1953, the National Academy of Sciences credited DDT with having averted 500 million insect-borne deaths globally and 1 billion insect-borne illnesses. In Sri Lanka that same year, there were only 18 cases of malaria. DDT was used to eradicate malaria-carrying mosquitoes, the Anopheles mosquito, in the United States and Europe. So the reason why we don't have malaria now here is because of DDT and swamp draining, water draining practices. And so it was incredible. There's footage of soldiers who releasing prisoners from concentration camps in Europe after World War II and spraying them down with DDT, because one of the leading causes of death in concentration camps wasn't only gas chambers, but it was also big epidemic typhus outbreaks because of lice infestation. So very low toxicity for people, very good for public health. It also turned out that DDT was really, really good for agriculture. So farmers, for the first time, had a very low toxicity insecticide that could kill locusts and armyworm and a whole variety of insects that really devastated their yields. And so it got widely used in agriculture. Rachel Carson very rightly pointed out that DDT was a broad spectrum insecticide and was having off-target effects and killing all sorts of insects, so even insects that would be beneficial to crops, and became concerned about it. Now, she realized how important DDT was for food security, because she had lived through the 30s and the Dust Bowl and was aware of the Dust Bowl, was aware of the food lines and things like that. So she was acutely aware of food insecurity and what that meant for populations. And so in Silent Spring, she actually recommended that people use a totally natural chemical made by a bacterium called Bacillus thuringiensis as an insecticide to kill insects that really were bad for crops, and it impacted food security. And the nice thing about BT was that it really only targeted crop pests. It didn't have a whole lot of off-target effects. And so to this day, it's approved for organic farming. So organic farmers spray BT on their crops. And it's used in mosquito eradication campaigns globally. So you can put BT in water to prevent Aedes mosquitoes from curing dengue and a variety of other things like that. So it's both public health and for crops. Where companies got smart was they discovered the gene in the bacterium that made that insecticidal protein and put it in the crops. And so now, which is genetically modified crops, GMO, now GMO crops generally need very little, if any, insecticide because they've incorporated it in the crops. So this chemical that's approved for organic farming is also in genetically modified crops. So anyway, that's all where that came from. But Rachel Carson's book also was the impetus for starting the environmental movement, and which is fine. The environmental movement's good. We want to protect Mother Earth. But she also, so the first order of business for President Nixon, this book was the nidus for starting the EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency, and first order of business was to ban DDT. Now, the problem with a complete ban in the United States, that's one thing, but in other countries where there's malaria and things like the reason why they wanted to ban it, let me be clear. The reason why they wanted to ban it was because it was biopersistent and bioaccumulated up the food chain. And there were allegations that it was harming the eggshells of birds and a variety of other things. And the problem with the fear that was built around this, it's one thing if you're in a country where you do have food security and you have alternatives for controlling insects and food security. And by the 1970s, when DDT was banned, we did. And it's entirely a different thing if you've got a high burden of insect pest pressure, and those insects carry diseases that kill kids and adults, but that kill people. And so the fear that was kind of engineered by the environmental movement about DDT really, I think, overstated for public health the risks of DDT. And as a matter of fact, DDT is still used in several countries. It's painted on the walls where there is bad malaria because it is one of the effective ways of preventing it. And DDT is not only just an insecticide, it has repellent properties too. So mosquitoes don't want to be in the house where there's DDT painted on the walls. So I think that the discussion that has gone around about DDT has really given people a bad impression of this chemistry that literally saved millions of lives.
I was watching a documentary about the opening of Disneyland a little while ago because I'm in my 30s now, and things that you never thought would be interesting actually are. You're like, oh yeah, let's watch that. And one of the things I noticed is that in Tomorrowland, which is one of the areas of Disneyland and Disney World, the way that they paid for it is they got corporate sponsors to help finance the park, and one of those was Monsanto in the 1950s. And the reason I bring that up is her book came out, less than a decade later, and you can see the radical change in our culture following the book and following the development of the environmental movement. I mean, today something like that would be unheard of, I think, for like a big pharma company or a big ag company, whatever, to just openly sponsor a consumer-facing service or venue like that, because the perception is so negative. Mm-hmm. So I think it's pretty clear this had a really negative effect. But to your point about food security, and I didn't know this, but apparently Joni Mitchell wrote a song, and there's a lyric in here. I got to find it. It's in the story. But there's a lyric in here. I think it's called Big Yellow Taxi. And the lyric in the song says, "Hey, hey, farmer, put away that DDT. I don't care about spots on my apples. Leave me the birds and the bees, please." Which is just perfect, right? It's like you have a know-nothing celebrity who was a great musician, not to take that away from her. But I think that just sums it up, right? I don't care about no spots on my apples. It's like, yeah, well, but you got plenty of apples to eat,
Well, you might care if those spots actually carried a fungal infection that gave you a toxin that comes from mycotoxins, which come from fungi. I mean, there are not that's not a good thing, eating mycotoxins. The mycotoxins can be teratogenic. They can be carcinogenic. They can make you hallucinate, depending on which one it is. There are a whole variety of things that are endocrine disruptors. They are everything that people make claims about pesticides, mycotoxins in your food, which are carried by insects, can do that on a population level.
Very bad. Very bad. It's not like the fun, take a mushroom and have a trippy afternoon. This is like, no. This is like, don't breathe anymore. Kind of. This is bad,
Yeah.
And it also speaks to the fact that we use these chemistries for a reason. It's not just willy nilly like, well, this might be fun. We could just manufacture a whole bunch of this and dump it on our farmland. That's not how it works.
Right.
One other thing before we move on that the story notes towards the end is that the chemophobia definitely developed after the book, in part because of the environmental movement, but the science community has contributed to this as well. McBride quotes a scientist who points out that scientists are probably more likely to do an experiment that leads to a clickable result, and journals are probably more likely to publish sensational results. And we've talked about that a million times on the show. We've talked about all the different examples, all of the drastic headlines that you see. And so everyone, again, back to what we started with, everyone's contributing to this. So, we'll point to the problem. We'll go, gee whiz, this is sure bad. I wish that Kennedy guy would just shut up. But then you flip it to, the journal of blah, blah, blah. And it's like, if you eat chicken nuggets, you're going to get Alzheimer's. It's like, no.
Yes, exactly.
You're not.
It's a perfect bipartisan storm.
Yes. Well said. Okay. Next story then, and by the way, that story in Slate, which I encourage everyone to read, is excellent.
It's a great story.
This book helped save the planet, but created a very harmful myth. Very good. Go read that at Slate. Excellent article by Katie McBride. Okay, next story. This is an original, I believe, to Genetic Literacy Project. This is by Daniel Persall and Helen Sang. Large-scale intensive land-sparing farming is the sustainable future, not the problem. Really good stuff here, Liza. This is also well-worn territory for us, but they're taking aim at the BBC, which, as a lot of media outlets do, is very enthusiastic for the old-timey red barn kind of a farm operation. The way your grandpa and your grandma used to do it, kind of a thing. And they're just pointing out that it's actually big scaled agriculture that is more sustainable, primarily because you can get as much, it's intensive agriculture. You can get as much as you can out of the land that you use, and then you can leave more space open for birds and bees, as Joni Mitchell was so eager to protect.
That's
right?
exactly right.
So you can go look into this. It's called land sparing. There's this sort of debate that has gone on in terms of land sparing versus land sharing, where you farm the same land, where you let the little critters roam and all the insects do their beautiful business and everything's natural and wonderful, and you grow in a way that doesn't interfere with them. Or the alternative, which seems to be, if I remember the literature correctly, is the better option, because you can produce more on a limited amount of space, which means more food for hungry people, and more insects and more flowers and all the beautiful things that we all care about.
Yeah, if you look at I've posted a couple of times, and Simon Mackling has posted a couple of times a graph, and it's a bar chart that's the bars are made of rows of corn, right? Looking at how much land it took in 1940 to grow 10 bushels of corn versus now, and the amount of land that is saved by using modern agricultural techniques is just remarkable. And so it's really, really important to use, especially if we're going to feed 10 billion people, the most productive, efficient ways of farming possible. I'm not an expert in animal agriculture, but the claim from so many places, media outlets, is that intensive animal agriculture it doesn't take into account the welfare of animals, uses too many antibiotics. There's a whole mythology around animal ag. And what doesn't appear to be understood is that part of the reason why you get so much yield from these animals when they are taken care of in this way is that they are healthier. They are, in terms of animal welfare, they're actually better cared for. And because they're healthier and they're better cared for, they produce much, much more milk, eggs, meat, all of that. And that's not the only thing that you get out of animal ag. You get all sorts of products, gelatin for your petri dishes. You get leather, a whole variety, wool for sweaters and things like that. And if you don't take care of your animals well, and I'm not saying smallholder farmers don't take care of their animals well, but with intensive agriculture, you are able to do with far fewer animals a whole way of managing them that makes them much more productive. So you need fewer of them. So that's one. And the other thing that their claim is that their CO2 emissions and methane emissions are cause climate change, and we need to really get rid of animal ag because of that. Well, if you look at this particular article, they talk about some of the really creative things that people are doing with that. They're using methane emissions to actually use that methane as gas to heat homes, to run the electricity and things like that out at the farm. So it becomes a closed kind of loop, of a really efficient use, and it's very creative. And I think it's really, really important that we look at this method of farming critically. Once again, there's nothing wrong with small farms, but these things, these operations are portrayed in a way that's very negative, and it's not reality when it comes to the claims that are made about it don't reflect the reality of the situation.
They profile a farmer in the story, dairy, so raising cows. I gotta. There it is. Okay, so this dairy, as you were talking about, they take the manure from the animals, and they generate natural gas, and this powers not only their operation, but it's enough. It's from 8,400 cows, so it's enough renewable natural gas to cool and heat 1,860 homes in Wisconsin, where the farm is.
It's insane.
Yeah, and that all comes because of modern technology, and again, as we've talked about before, it's scalable, or rather, it's more cost effective the bigger the operation is. Right, the more of the gas you can generate from more animal manure, the more sustainable this is. So people absolutely have this backwards. And I wish the media would I don't want to say realize, because I think they're too smart to overlook this. I think it's ideological for most of these reporters. And in fact, the BBC, I don't know which reporter it was, but someone at the BBC attacked our friend who's based in Africa. Jesper Machogu, I believe is how you pronounce his last name. He was attacked for coming to South Africa or Europe, I forget, but he left Kenya, where he's based, and flew to this conference to give a speech about what he's doing, which is trying to provide electricity and food
to his whole community.
Right.
He's an amazing person.
Yeah.
And he incidentally has internships for anybody who wants to have a little bout with subsistence farming.
Yes, that's where I was going to go. If you want to experience the joys of the Red Barn Farm, he'll put you on a little cot. You can pull up weeds, and it's a lot of fun. You can get your water out of a well. It's all natural.
It's all natural.
It's a lot of fun.
Got very few volunteers.
Yes. So instead of attacking him for taking $3,400 or whatever it was to fly to another continent, or to the edge of the continent to give a speech, go help him. Let's go see how much you really love all the stuff that you want to force on the world.
I think all the Davos people, all the who are doing the COP 22 or whatever, what COP are we on? 28,
I
29,
don't
something
know.
like that. They
Cop,
fly all over the
yeah,
place and wag their fingers at people, but maybe they should go volunteer to help Juicer.
yeah. COP, stupid idea, 80,000. Let's just settle at that. That's all I've got. Yeah, okay. So we'll leave it there. Go read this article. It's on GLP. And by the way, it was originally published at Science for Sustainable Agriculture, just to clear that up. Daniel Purcell is a great follow on Twitter. He's one of these people that actually knows about agriculture. And so when you read the stuff he writes, you can be confident that it's correct. Because, yeah, everyone loves expertise until the expertise runs into their ideology. Then we don't like
That's
it
right.
so much. Then we don't like it.
That's
Okay.
right.
Final story of the day. This one is troubling and complicated is the best way I can describe it. So this one's called Placebo Controversy. When should they be ethically used? And I think the headline is actually not quite right in this case. It's not in studies. This is by Jess Steyer. And she's talking about actually using placebos in a clinical context and whether or not that's ethical. And Liza, you're the doctor, so you can explain all this. But I guess the idea is, we have some evidence that when you give people placebos, if they think it's going to work, it often does work. Mm-hmm. And it's not just a psychosomatic thing. There's actually some interesting neurobiology involved here. And it has to do with repeated experience. So the more you take a drug, it's not really a drug, and you think it's going to work, it works. And effectively, if I understand this correctly, you train your brain to accept that the placebo is working, and it often has some effect. I don't know if it's enough to replace medication. And in fact, she actually rejects that outright in the story, that we shouldn't use placebos in place of actually demonstrably
effective drugs with clear mechanisms of action that make people get better.
Correct. And there's some fascinating edges to this, though, because, one of the keys in medicine is consent, right? The patient needs to understand what they're being exposed to, why, how it works, all of these really important questions when you start taking a drug. But there's the rub, right? Because, the placebo tends not to work. If you tell somebody this is a sugar pill, it's not supposed to do anything, but it might in your case, right? That, I think, for one reason or another, defeats the purpose of it. So
That's exactly right.
I don't know what to make of this. The other thing, which she talks about, although I'm not convinced, is that we need to be careful about allowing people to market homeopathic products and other alternative health herbal remedies and so forth on this basis. But again, I don't know how you can square that circle, right? I don't know how you can say, well, in medicine, we can responsibly prescribe placebos, but these people can't sell sugar pills in a bottle or
right,
echinacea extract or whatever, and they're not allowed to, but we're allowed to, and I don't think she quite comes down on either side of that, except to say that you can't allow people to falsely market products. But all that to say, I just don't know what the answer is, Liza. So what do you think?
So I think it's a really interesting article, and I think she's trying to be scientific about it and balanced about it. She's not bought into this idea that that placebos are going to be a be-all, catch-all. You should dump all of traditional medicine for this kind of effect. She's very good about saying that, but she does talk about the potential the potential plasticity of the brain and how it works, and if you can actually psychologically make a response. It's not really even psychologically, but physically in your brain, make changes based on what you think is going to happen to get some kind of relief from whatever symptom you're having. Now, this is an interesting concept because the brain is, first of all, a black box. Nobody really quite understands how they understand kind of how it connects and stuff like that, but nobody understands how it really, really works, right? And one of the most amazing things I've ever seen in my life is a festival that's held in Malaysia called Thaipusam. And Thaipusam is done every year And it's a Hindu festival where they're thanking the god Subramaniam for having rendered them some kind of luck. I think is the general gist of it. Something good happens. So what these people do is they go into a trance and dress in saffron robes and then proceed to pretty much skewer themselves. They have shirts that are made of fish hooks that limes are hanging off of. They have poles that are poked through their cheeks with limes on the end of it. They walk on knives. They walk on fire. It's the most incredible. I've personally been there and seen that. They don't appear to have any pain, and they don't really bleed very much. And that tells you, and when they're in this trance, it's this music that gets them in this trance, and you should look it up because it's a fascinating festival. When they're in this trance, they don't appear to have any pain. They walk up 272 steps to the Batu Caves, get blessed, and then take it all out and come back next year for the same thing. It is potentially the wildest thing I've ever seen in my life, and it speaks to the power of the brain and how the brain can control physiologic responses. They have these things called kavadis, which are literally skewers that go into their body that are big effigies of the god. So very wild festival, but it speaks to something about how if the brain is in the right condition, it can overcome something that appears to be very, very painful. I don't know to what degree. I mean, that would be placebo, right? You're not taking any medicine. You just listening to music, and it makes you do this stuff. You do this stuff, and you don't have any pain. The thing about placebos is I think that different people have probably different responses based on how much they believe they're going to benefit from the placebo. And this is why I think so many people who take supplements sort of report that they feel better. And since they feel subjectively better, it reinforces that notion. And while I don't recommend that people bypass their medications and things like that, I do think that there is some kind of neuropsychological axis there that can make you perceive or feel like you're feeling better. And she talks a little bit about the autonomic nervous system and talks a little bit about cortisol and stress and stuff like that. And so it may be that there are things that we don't quite understand that help modulate the way you feel based on belief. So I think it's an interesting hypothesis. I still please take your medicine and don't bypass medicine. The other thing that she mentions, which I think is potentially a very valid thing, is that a lot of times the natural history of disease or discomfort, because most of the stuff that she's talking about is discomfort, right? The natural history of discomfort is that it goes away after a little while. And so if you have a headache and you don't take something, it eventually goes away. If you have a headache and you do take something, it eventually goes away. And so maybe you're making an association from the taking something of that's quote unquote fixing it, when it's actually the natural history of the discomfort.
I'm torn on this again, because some of it strikes me as true, right? It resonates. So, for example, I hate working out. I do it 3 times a week.
I'm so proud of you. I don't.
Thank you.
I should.
You. I thank you. I'm going to put a gold star on my fridge because Dr. Liza gave me a compliment. But the serious point is, it's like doing deadlifts and these really heavy lifts and doing cardio for 30 or 40 minutes, it just sucks. Like if you just go into a gym, especially if you're surrounded by a bunch of strangers who smell and it's loud and you can hear Taylor Swift in the background, it just makes me like want to go through that ritual you just described. It's just like, this sucks. But if I'm hydrated and I'm fully rested and I put in heavy metal in my ears, in my headphones, you can feel it. Like it amps you up and you get excited about it.
Mm-hmm.
and then you can really push through it. Like there's a palpable difference. Like after I warm up and I start running on the bike, where I'm like, I dig this. Like, like I know it hurts, but I'm like, hell yeah, let's do this, right? And then after you're done, like the next day or the day after that, you're sore and you're like, wow, that was painful, right? So there's some truth to it. There clearly is something. But on the other hand, I had someone close to me get in a very severe car accident just this week. And they had to finagle and negotiate with the doctors to get adequate pain meds because we've talked about before all the opioid hysteria. So and not that she's doing this. I don't want to make that clear. I'm not making this accusation against her, but the idea that we're gonna somehow tell someone who's been in a severe car accident or has chronic pain and like, well, there's this open label placebo we're going to give you and just trust us. It's going to rewire your brain. It's going to be terrific. I don't know. Like
that's not going to fly.
I'm not sold on it. Right. And if you have major surgery, if you have open heart surgery or you have your knee reconstructed, I promise you're going to want OxyContin. I promise you. Right. Everyone's brave until they're in serious pain.
Exquisite pain. When you're in exquisite pain, all of a sudden people start going, oh, maybe I was a little bit too judgy.
Yes, 100%. And the other thing is that I don't know, and she tries, but I don't know, again, how you're going to distinguish, who's allowed to do this legitimately. Because one of our dear friends in the anti-GMO movement, Jeffrey Smith, who runs the adorably named Institute for Responsible Technology out of his basement in Iowa, he put out a survey of his email newsletter subscribers several years ago, and it was basically them saying, I eat organic, and I know I'm healthier as a result of that. And another group that we're also dear friends with, who I won't name right now, defended that email study because everyone came out and said, this isn't a study, this is just you asking loaded questions to people.
Opining, yeah.
Right. And the response was, well, we have good evidence that the placebo effect is real. So if these people believe that, eating organic peaches improves their health, then who are you to judge, right? Maybe it actually is a legitimate effect. I don't know how you can say, well, that's an illegitimate use of this research on the placebo effect. But what we're doing
is totally legit.
Right. So I just don't know how you square the circle. Maybe there's something I'm missing. Yeah.
It's an interesting article, though,
yes.
and it's interesting to think about. Yeah, and I think she presented it in a way that was that does have some scientific validity. So
it was very responsibly written, and within it's like 2 paragraphs or 3 paragraphs down, she says there's a few non-starters for me, and she outlines very clearly, right? This should not replace medicine. This should not be used for serious illness or medical conditions. So she's clear, right? She's not trying to pull one over on anyone or sell a supplement or whatever.
She's just exploring the idea, the scientific idea behind it.
Yes. And I love, just in a more abstract sense, I love that she approached this because it illustrates the very difficult ethical questions that, especially doctors, but anyone dealing with health and medicine has to deal with, right? Like, at what point are you doing something unethical or potentially harmful? Where's that line, right? And I don't know if there's a great answer in many cases.
And I also think, and I said maybe this a little bit on the space today, I also think that patients, if they want to take a supplement, I don't care. As long as the supplement's not bad for them, right? I think that if that brings them comfort in some way, fine. I think they should be able to make that choice. Just like you should be able to make the choice of what you want to eat. I don't want to have somebody telling me I can't eat meat or I can't. That's if they should have the choice to do what they want. But I'm not going to entertain a non-scientific support of what they're doing. It's like, I think that I really do not think people should be taking hydroxychloroquine for COVID, even though people have been using it off-label because it's got a narrow therapeutic window. And I think that there's potential to go blind. It's dangerous, right, to do that. I don't care if they take ivermectin. Ivermectin's not going to hurt them, and they might not have worms. Ivermectin's not going to particularly hurt them. It's very low toxicity. You got a wide therapeutic window. If they believe it's going to fix them, fine. I'm going to tell them I don't think so, and I've looked at all the literature and everything like that. But I'm not going to go off the deep end and be so self-righteous and condescending with them that they're not going to take a vaccine because of my position on ivermectin.
And if that makes you uncomfortable, just remember, my body, my choice. Right? I want to, and again, I don't want to take either of those drugs. Whatever. It's weird to me. Like, people will say, and we're going on a rabbit trail, but whatever. COVID isn't that big of a deal. Most people survive, which is true. But then they say, well, I'm going to take hydroxychloroquine. So I'm like, well, which is it? Is it not that big of a deal? It's the sniffles, or do you need this drug for river blindness?
This drug, yeah. and this past couple of years has been a real fantastic view on human nature, right? And belief systems and how not to do things.
Yes, indeed. Incidentally, neither of those drugs pops out of the ether. They have to be manufactured by pharmaceutical companies.
Yes, by pharmaceutical companies. Big Pharma.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Big Pharma actually donates ivermectin to Africa.
Yes. And if I'm not mistaken, Bayer originally manufactured hydroxychloroquine, wasn't it?
We I would say we did chloroquine.
Okay.
And Sanofi does hydroxychloroquine.
Okay.
And both of us, we did chloroquine, and Sanofi, everybody donated a whole bunch of medicine to try to explore the idea of whether it was beneficial or not. So Big Pharma made huge donations to explore that idea.
All right. There you go. Go check out that article. Really good. Once again, at GLP, called The Placebo Controversy: When Should They Ethically Be Used in Studies? By Jess Steyer, who is a public health scientist, by the way. I didn't say that. Great article. And we're done. I'm off to a concert. Everyone have a lovely weekend. You too,
Me too.
Liza. Where are you going? Who are you going to see? Who are you going to see?
I'm going to go see Kaleo.
I have no idea who that is.
You should check them out. They're awesome.
They
are an Icelandic rock group, and that sounds kind of crazy, but they are really good.
I'm gonna have to go check it out. Bands from Europe just have an interesting. They have that
not
it factor.
Europop.
No.
Yes.
No. I know what you mean.
Yes, they do.
I know what you mean. But like, if you give me a choice between two bands, one of them's from Alabama and the other one's from
I'm going to the Alabama
Sweden.
one usually.
I get that, but like if it's a metal band, I'm like, Sweden makes great metal, so I'm gonna. You know what I mean?
Does it really? Oh, that's really funny.
Yeah. So, but anyways, I get what you're saying, right? There's something unique about a band from a foreign country.
Yeah, that's true. But they make beautiful videos too. They make videos on icebergs and in mountains and all sorts of places. Like, it's really cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Well, everyone, enjoy your weekends. Thank you for joining us as always. Spaces, 11 a.m. every Friday Central Time. You're welcome to participate. Be nice. We'll bring you up. You can speak. If you post weird pictures or you're mean to people, we'll kick you out. Those are the only rules.
Yep.
So come next time. We will see you for the next podcast next week. Thank you so much. Have a lovely afternoon, everybody.
Take care.